The emergency beacon had been silent for 3 solar cycles when Mira Lorne finally cracked the ice-sealed hatch of the Viridian scout ship. Inside, the air was thin and cold, recycled to its absolute minimum to preserve what little power remained. The distress signal had called it a cargo malfunction. But Mira knew better the moment she saw them. 4 cubs. Quadruped. Covered in silvery blue fur that shimmered like starlight. With eyes too large and intelligent for mere animals. They huddled together in the cargo bay's corner, their tails bushy and expressive tucked tight against their bodies. The smallest one, barely the size of Mira's forearm, let out a pitiful whimper that needed no translation. "Hey there," Mira whispered, crouching low. "I'm not going to hurt you." The cubs didn't move. Their universal translator collars hung loose and dark around their necks, dead, like everything else on this ship. The adult Viridians who had been transporting them were gone, likely evacuated when the ship's core began failing. They had left the cubs behind, perhaps thinking rescue would come quickly, perhaps thinking wrong. Mira ran a hand through her dark hair, assessing. The cubs were malnourished, dehydrated, and clearly terrified. The ship's food dispensers had frozen solid, leaving behind only crystallized nutrient blocks that the cubs had refused to touch. She picked one up, sniffed it, and grimaced. It smelled like antiseptic and minerals technically nutritious. Perhaps, but utterly unappetizing. "Yeah, I wouldn't eat that either," she muttered. The smallest cub, Mira would later learn her name was Kiffa, took a tentative step forward. Her legs trembled with weakness, and her tail drooped so low it dragged against the metal floor. The others watched with desperate, hungry eyes, but none dared approach the strange bipedal creature that had invaded their prison. Mira made her decision quickly. She returned to her own ship, the Wayward Sun, and began rummaging through her personal supplies. Rice, dried vegetables, a precious container of chicken bouillon she'd been saving, salt, pepper, a few herbs grown in her tiny hydroponics bay. Humans might have been the newest species to join the Galactic Coalition, but they had brought with them 10,000 years of culinary evolution. She hauled her portable cook unit into the Viridian ship and set it up in the cargo bay. The cubs watched with wary curiosity as she filled a pot with purified water and set it to boil. When she added the bouillon cube, the aroma that filled the cold air was transformative, savory, warm, rich with umami depth that no nutrient block could replicate. Kiffa's nose twitched, her tail lifted slightly. Mira added the rice, watching it swirl in the golden liquid. She spoke softly as she worked, her voice a gentle melody in the silence. "You know, my grandmother used to make this when I was sick. She'd say that food isn't just fuel, it's comfort. It's memory. It's love." She stirred in the vegetables, then let the mixture simmer until the rice was tender and the broth had thickened slightly. The smell intensified, earthy, nourishing, alive in a way that sterile ship rations could never be. She filled a shallow container and set it on the floor, then backed away to give the cubs space. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Kiffa took a step. Then another. Her siblings watched as the smallest among them approached the bowl, her nose working frantically to process this new miracle. She lowered her muzzle and took a tentative lap. Her tail began to wag. It started slowly, just a small twitch, then built into a full, sweeping motion that spoke of pure, uncomplicated joy. Kiffa dove into the broth, and the dam broke. The other 3 cubs rushed forward, jostling and slurping and making sounds of contentment that transcended language barriers. Their tails wagged in perfect synchronization, a symphony of relief. Mira felt something tight in her chest loosen. She prepared more, bowl after bowl, until all 4 cubs had eaten their fill. Their bellies were round, their eyes bright, and their tails never stopped moving. Kiffa, bold now, approached Mira and pressed her small head against the human's knee, purring, or the Viridian equivalent of it. "You're welcome, little one," Mira said, scratching behind the cub's ears. She transported them all to the Wayward Sun, settling them in her own quarters where it was warm and safe. As she piloted toward the nearest coalition station, she continued to cook for them. Simple earth dishes, vegetable stew, mild curry over rice, even a batch of homemade bread that they tore into with enthusiastic savagery. When they finally arrived at the station, the Viridian officials were stunned. The cubs they had feared lost were not only alive but thriving, their fur glossy, their movements energetic, their tails in constant motion. The doctor who examined them was bewildered. "What did you feed them?" he asked, his translator rendering his chittering speech into flat English. "Just some soup," Mira said with a shrug. Earth style. The official stared at her as if she had performed a miracle. In the Galactic Coalition, food was fuel. It was scientifically optimized nutrient delivery. The idea that taste mattered, that comfort mattered, that the act of cooking could be an expression of care, these were distinctly human concepts. "We have much to learn from your species," the official said quietly. Kiffa refused to leave Mira's side. Even when her siblings were taken to the recovery ward, the smallest cub stayed pressed against Mira's leg, her tail wagging whenever the human looked down at her. The officials eventually conceded Kiffa had bonded, as cubs sometimes did, and forcing a separation would be cruel. As Mira carried her new companion back to the ship, Kiffa nestled in her arms and made soft, contented sounds. The human smiled. "Guess I'm making soup for two from now on," she said. Behind them, in the station's cafeteria, the Viridian officials were already placing orders for Earth spices. Word had spread fast. The humans had brought something precious to the galaxy, something that couldn't be synthesized or replicated by machines. They had brought the knowledge that sometimes the best technology in the universe was simply caring enough to make something warm, nourishing, and made with love. And every tail that tasted it would wag in agreement.